Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and I trust you had a good weekend. I'll get to the news in a second that's come out of at Kotoni, which is about 45 minutes from Lamu Island, but I'll deal with that in a second. I was in Kigali over the weekend, and for a very noble cause, actually. Financial fitness was the term of it. It was hosted by the First Lady Jeannette Kagame's Imbuto Foundation, and I'll read you a little bit from an article in the New Times, which is a Rwanda newspaper. First Lady Jeannette Kagame has urged Rwanda youth to handle finances responsibly so as to develop a healthy relationship with money and ensure frugal utilization of scarce resources. Mrs. Kagame said this while launching the 21st edition of the Imbuto Foundation Youth Forum series held at Gabiro military barracks. And I'll put up a photograph of the entrance where you see this poster, which is highly evocative, in fact. It's an interesting poster in itself. Do have a look at it. In Gatsibo district yesterday, we left at about 6 a.m. and got there at about 8:15. And it was a great chance to look at Rwanda. Very green, incredibly safe. You can walk at any time of day or night. And I think that's going to be a big selling point if the new level of uncertainty continues in Kenya in particular. This year's theme, Financial Fitness, was coined to nurture youth into being responsible agents of financial responsibility. The age range was 25 to 35. I'll put up a photograph. A selfie I took, but you could see the audience in the back. It was quite a big one. At least 250 young professionals aged 25 to 35, including civil servants, entrepreneurs, employees of private sector companies, non-profit and youth-led organizations attended the event. Forum featured a number of prominent speakers, including James Gatera, the Chief Executive Officer of the Bank of Kigali, very interesting man, I must say. I sat next to him at lunch. Myself, Vincent Munyeshiaka, Sam Mulindwa, Permanent Secretaries in the Ministries of Local Government and Public Service, respectively. Investing in the youth is at the heart of our mission at Imbuto. We find it important to accompany young people on this journey by helping to instill important Rwandan values, nurture a positive can-do attitude, and encourage you to communicate with confidence, the First Lady said. Being at Gabiro reminds us of the liberators, most of them your age or younger, that freed our country from a destructive leadership 20 years ago, Mrs. Kagame said. The First Lady added, what is most important is to embrace and accept who you are. Being true to yourself should be one of the guiding principles in making choices, be it in finances or in any other area. It's a noble cause in my opinion, but as I entered that entrance with Her Excellency Amina Karitiani, who's a good friend of mine, was the previous ambassador to Nairobi, I couldn't help feeling I was really in the heart of the RPF, which I was. And I'll put up that poster again of as you enter Gabiro. I'll put up a photograph of the Imbuto audience. Another one that I said, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a photograph where I was sitting next to Jeannette Kagame at lunch. I said to the First Lady, I was going to say, let's do a selfie, and then I thought that would be a stretch too far. And we had a long conversation, and I reminded her, I said, in 2011 when we hosted the President for Mindspeak, and I had that 15 or 20 minutes with him prior to the session, and he's so ascetic and so thin. And I said, I wish I had that figure now. And she told me that when we got married, everyone complained because everyone said, when you get married, our husband needs fattening up. And she said he has never put on an ounce of weight. We'd spoken about many more things, and then very graciously, the President was on the same premises, and he texted her and gave his best wishes via her, which I appreciated. I don't know if you can see this photograph taken on Flickr where I was meeting with Janet. And if you haven't seen President Paul Kagame on Mindspeak, this is your chance to have a look at it. The link is on the front page, on Rich Wrap-Ups. It's a YouTube link. It was a very interesting session, I must admit, and it's come a very long way, and I was astonished this time round, really. Convention Centre coming up, 3,000-seater, I think. That's going to be a real winner, in my view. Lots of new hotels, lots of development. The place is motoring, and of course Diamond has bought out a bank there as well. Home thoughts. I like this quote from Paul Valery. The trouble with our times is that the future is not what it used to be. Of course, I'm a great admirer of Andy Warhol, and I wish I'd had the money when I could have afforded it to have bought some of his work. Self-Portrait, 1986, by Andy Warhol, is one of the classic Warhols. Political reflections. The most significant act by a jihadist group since Al-Qaeda attacked the US on the 11th of September 2001, says Mr. Bowen of the BBC. And then I'm just going to jump through some quotes which got my attention. In other words, Iran has the biggest stake of any nation in the outcome of the struggle in Iraq. That's Newsweek. The Wall Street Journal reported on Sunday that Washington was preparing to open talks with Iran on ways to push back the militants. That's senior officials. Newspaper said the dialogue was expected to begin this week. It comes as the US and other world powers strive for an agreement with Tehran to curb its nuclear program. I wrote about this on the 28th of October 2013, Barack Obama and Hassan Rouhani, the two Husseins, when I was talking about the new rapprochement that began around then, looking to snap a losing sequence in US-Iran relations that goes all the way back to the Iranian Revolution in 1979, when Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. And then I was referring to the fact that both Barack and Hassan share the same name, that being Hussein or Hassan, or an interpretation of the same. And that's, of course, the same name as the Prophet Muhammad's revered grandsons. And I was then saying, probably quite 40 years or so. And from there I jumped to that Ai Weiwei thing I saw at the Hirshhorn, when Ai Weiwei's written, "What's in a name?" And I still love it. A name is the first and final marker of individual rights, one fixed part of the ever-changing human world. A name is the most basic characteristic of our human rights, no matter how poor or how rich. All living people have a name, and it is endowed with good wishes, the expectant blessings of kindness and virtue. I said Hussein and Hassan are going to have to cut through a great deal of interference, and it seems they continue to make progress and are quite able to move tactically as well. I'll put up that image. From Aleppo in northern Syria almost to the Iraqi-Iranian border, the jihadists of ISIS and sundry other groupuscules, paid by the Saudi Wahhabis and Kuwaiti oligarchs, now rule thousands of square miles. This is not me, this is Robert Fisk. Then I found this horrific image from Jenna Musa, mass execution by ISIS of captured Iraqi soldiers, and I think everyone's seen that. And as I've said before, these are real ne'er-do-wells and barbarians in my view. In particular, the president never said anything approaching this: "We will under no circumstances permit the terrorists to take control of Iraq," which is a valid point. Saying Barack Obama is a man who knows how to use words. It's possible then that this omission was intended to prepare us for the worst. One likely reason that Obama refused aid to his Iraqi ally is that he has other, much closer allies who are funding the terrorist group invading Iraq. For example, since the war in Syria started, it's been an open secret that Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia have been giving at least hundreds of millions of dollars to the Islamic extremist groups attacking the Syrian government. This fact is occasionally mentioned in the mainstream media, but the full implications are never fleshed out. And now that the Syrian war is gushing over its borders, the media would rather pretend that ISIS sprang from a desert oasis rather than the pocketbooks of the US-allied Gulf states. Patrick Coburn recently noted ISIS now controls or can operate with impunity in a great stretch of territory in western Iraq and eastern Syria, making it militarily the most successful jihadi movement ever. Mike Whitney describes the Iraqi partition idea, which is hoving into view. The plan was first proposed by Leslie Gelb, the former president of the Council on Foreign Relations, and then Senator Joe Biden. According to the New York Times, the so-called soft partition plan calls for dividing Iraq into 3 semi-autonomous regions. There would be a loose Kurdistan, a loose Shiistan, and a loose Sunnistan, all under a big, if weak, Iraq umbrella. And then Negroponte, however, is saying in Bloomberg, we have to engage, and that doesn't mean, by the way, engagement as, no, sorry, this might be Tony Blair, engagement as in Iraq or Afghanistan and ground troops, but it does mean that we actively try and shape the situation, which is an interesting quote. I'll see you guys in New York. Apparently this is what Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi said as his parting words to US troops in 2009. I'll put up a photograph of the man that I found on Time magazine. And then this caught my attention. 5 guys wearing flip-flops with the right capabilities in the basement with enough juice and you got a real problem, said Rogers. Somewhere in China, a man typed his username Ghost and password Hijack and proceeded to rifle the computers of a utility in the northeastern US. He plucked schematics of its pipelines, he copied security guard patrol memos, he sought access to systems that regulate the flow of natural gas. He cruised channels where keystrokes could cut off a city's heat or make a pipeline explode. That didn't appear to be his intention, and neither was economic espionage. While he was one of the Chinese officers the US charged last month with infiltrating computers to steal corporate secrets, this raid was different. The hacker called Ugly Gorilla invaded the utility on what was probably a scouting mission, looking for information China could use to wage war. And then a very interesting article in The Independent about, the sort of black world where people are being held and we don't know, in prisons and so forth. Men and women who carried out the rendition program were equipped apparently with fake identities. Paglen has made a collection of these people's unconvincing and fluctuating signatures, people, as he puts it, who don't exist because they're in the business of disappearing other people. Saying that, mass surveillance creates a dramatic power imbalance between citizens and government. Very interesting fellow. Paglen's project is political, but it is also philosophical. He's trying to show us the world, not as the media present it, but as it is. And that is a world in which official secrecy has never been so well entrenched, ubiquitous, or extravagantly well funded. I'm trying to push perception as far as I can, he says, so we can create a vantage point to look back at ourselves with very different kinds of eyes, fresh eyes, if you will. He's trying to show us, he says, the historical moment that we are living in. Currency markets, the euro is slightly firmer, 135.48, but declined 0.8% last week, and given the fireworks, it's a very resilient performance in my view. Dollar index 80.57, slipped off the top where we were not too long ago. Japanese yen 101.80, advanced against all of its 16 major peers. Swissy 0.8995. The pound is trading above 170. This is the first time since 2008. The BOE governor said June 12th the rate increase may come sooner than investors expect. The Aussie is back above 0.94 at 0.9402. The rupee traded beyond 60 for the first time in more than a month, but is back below it at 59.96. Concerns about the oil price will widen India's trade deficit, and that's a concern for us as well. South Korean won 10.18, the Rial 222.48, Egyptian pound 714.97, and the Rand 1071.92. Of course, I'll come to it. South Africa was downgraded. Yen is up 3.1% this year, the third best performer of 10 developed nation currencies tracked by Bloomberg. Dollars down 0.8%, and the euro has dropped 2.4%. I'll put up a one-year chart of sterling, and from the 12th of August when I visited, and I straight away said, you've got to be long sterling, because I could see that the recovery had real traction this time. I'm looking for 173.50 on sterling as a minimum objective. Dollar index 80.57, you'll see from the chart, and really I was looking at it on a long-term basis. We've been in this very tight range for quite a while now. Euro dollar 135.40. Gold 1282.77. Of course, not difficult to see what's going on. Geopolitical pressures ratcheting higher from Iraq to Ukraine to China. Fifth day of gains. If it closes higher today, would be the longest such run since February. I'll put up a 1-year chart. Again, I think you fade the rallies. Crude oil, however, I think is going even higher. I'll put up a 1-year chart, 107.40. This is the highest since September the 18th. And I think it's going higher still. Essentially, it's the most accurate barometer of geopolitical pressure in the global economy, and you can see that it's got every reason to be up here, and I think it could spike a lot higher. Former Ivory Coast President Gbagbo is to be tried at the ICC. The IMF is appointing a resident representative in Zimbabwe for the first time in 10 years, as the southern African country seeks to mend relations with the lender. And I wrote about this on the 3rd of June when I said, interestingly, you will note a linguistic inflection point in Zimbabwe of late. And if you study language, like I like to do, there's been a sea change over there. And I think actually Zimbabwe might well turn out to be the story of this year. South African all-share up 9.743% in 2014. It's at record all-time highs. However, South Africa's credit rating was cut to one level above junk by Standard & Poor's. I think this is a little bit backward-looking. I think the economy is actually in a bottoming-out process. Dollar rand not trading too badly at 10.7218 last, and I think its relative resilience tells you that this was priced into the market, and maybe the market's looking through the ratings agency's action. Egyptian pound 714.81. We've been here for a few days. Egyptian stock market fell 1.05% yesterday, but it's up 27.602% in a very strong CC rally that we've seen that started last year, but it's gained strength this year. Nigerian all share is up 0.454888%, but it's rallied very sharply since sort of 21st March. Ghana Stock Exchange up 9.964%, but all of that's been lost via a currency in free fall. And where the head of research for the central bank admitted because of shortfalling government revenue, all financing of the deficit came from the central bank. And this was the accusation Fitch made, that said that they're just printing money. Reuters has a story, once a model for Africa, Ghana's economy loses its shine from hero to zero. And this is the point. I think the situation is becoming quite critical. There's been a chronic underestimation of the seriousness of the problem by the authorities. And that's the point. They've, however, eased foreign currency rules to increase dollar supply. The central bank overturned a rule that requires exporters to convert proceeds from sales abroad to the cedi in 5 days. Foreign companies will be allowed to pay local businesses using currencies other than the cedi, and exporters can retain 60% of revenue in foreign denominated accounts and convert 40% within 15 days, he said. The cedi bounced on that news, but it's down 22%, the biggest drop among 24 African currencies that Bloomberg tracked. There was a bomb explosion in Zanzibar which killed 1 and injured 4. First time for such incident to occur in Zanzibar, bringing great concern and fear to the public. And I wrote about this on September the 3rd and severally. September the 3rd, I said, the Swahili coast is a potential tinderbox from Lamu through Zanzibar and all points in between. Put up a photograph of the beach in Zanzibar, which is white and beautiful, and also a photograph of early morning as I was leaving the hotel in Kigali. I looked out the window and I took a photograph of the Serena, the pool, and a little bit of the hotel. I'll put that up as well. Very nice, well-appointed rooms, as they always are. Suspected Islamist insurgents in Kenya have raided a police station and set on fire at least 3 hotels and a petrol station, reportedly killing at least 26 people. That number's above 40 now. The group of gunmen entered the western coastal town of Mekapatoni and started shooting people around in town. The Interior Ministry said assault began at around 8 p.m. on Sunday. Gunshots reported up to 4 hours later and even later than that. Area Police Chief Hamaton Mwaliko said attackers hijacked a van from Witu town, which they used for the attacks They raided Mekotoni police station first and opened fire. Some hotels in the town are on fire. We don't know how many casualties are there for now. We understand the attackers have already fled, but our officers are pursuing them. Local government official Benson Mysori told the AFP, so far we have collected over 26 bodies and taken them to the mortuary, but we're still looking for more. I had a search in and I went back to the earliest sort of tweets that came out when this attack started. Sawe Saldana, who we follow each other on Twitter, said, guys, looks like suspect Al-Shabaab are running amok in Mekotoni. Lamu County police look overwhelmed. Heavy gunfire reported in Mekotoni, Lamu, between police and suspected terrorists. People fleeing their homes is another report. We are dying here is another real-time report. Al-Shabaab have been shooting for 2 hours now. Somebody help us. Breeze View Hotel is on fire. Lord help us all. Gunfires at Mekotoni and Lamu. Breeze View Restaurant fire. Help, help. And clearly the response time was not optimal, it seems. When you go from that, I'll put up an image of a burnt-out vehicle that Mitsuga of KTN posted. I wrote about the issue when on the 19th of May when I said the dashboard is blinking amber. And I quoted Don DeLillo's Point Omega. When you strip away surfaces, when you see into it, what's left is terror. This is the thing that literature was meant to cure. The epic poem, the bedtime story. And I was talking about social media in particular, saying there's enormous conversation and hullabaloo going on. And that, we have a business here where we're searching that noise for signals. And the signal to me is very loud and clear and unanimous. We are being spun an epic poem and bedtime story. Saying disbelief can be suspended. There is an absolute chasm between what we're being told, between the rhetoric and the reality on the ground, I'm afraid. And now that chasm is so wide, it's just untenable. Then I jumped from that saying, disbelief can be suspended, of course, but eventually we reach a Marx Brothers in duck soup moment. Well, who are you going to believe? Me or your own eyes? And basically, I think, that duck soup moment occurred during Westgate, and continuing resolutely down this path is eroding political capital. And I quoted Gladwell, I said, look at the world around you. It may seem like an immovable, implacable place. It is not. With the slightest push in just the right place, it can be tipped. Everything is looking extremely fragile, I said then. Put up a photograph of the setting sun in Lamu taken 1,360 days ago, and then just take you back to that piece I wrote on the 30th of September, immediately after Westgate. I said Westgate happened more than a week ago, and to date there is no grand unified theory. There are competing narratives, and just this potpourri of narratives which is leaving many of us uncertain. Earlier this week I characterized it as a BP moment. Kenya's share of voice was at a level never experienced before. The world's media was camped on our doorstep. I found myself watching the live feed, trawling eyewitness accounts, reading the Al-Shabaab Twitter handles. Twitter knocked them down about 4 times over that period, only for it to bounce back under a different handle. And you knew it was the same handle because it was the same voice. In fact, Al-Shabaab live tweeted Westgate, in my view. And the Interior Cabinet Secretary's bona fides were undermined by the real-time rebuttals coming out of these Twitter handles. The latency of the responses, the speed, latency, that's the sort of holy grail of those automated trading systems, but it's the speed of response, leads me to place the author of the Twitter handles on the scene in Westgate and for as yet undetermined time. And then, you know what I thought there. I put up a photograph of Westgate. But it is that issue where you have a reality. It's like, don't worry, come visit Kenya. It makes no sense if you're sitting anywhere outside our borders. It sounds like idiotic. And furthermore, that's denuding bona fides. Someone's got to come out and take this by the scruff of the neck and say, look, we've got a problem. We need all the help we can to sort it out. And the sooner that's done, the better. Otherwise, everybody will be upping sticks and going to Kigali, which is extremely safe. And I was walking about at like midnight. There's a fair bit of interest offshore Kenya at the moment. She said in Kenya the prize is oil. Then this was terrible, the story of Satao, the elephant. And do you remember I quoted this fellow Mark Diebel, who wrote about Satao in March. There are probably only a dozen of the fabled 100-plus pounders left in Savo's 16,000 square miles. After 2 years of filming around Savo, we heard of one of the fabled bulls. He was living on a community ranch notorious for its gangs of armed Somalis that poach elephants. According to our source, the huge bull hid in very thick bush during the day, only emerging to feed when it was dark. Much as we wanted to film a true tusker, we felt we couldn't risk searching for him. We'd only draw attention to the area he hid in, and that would put him in danger. There was no alternative but to wait. Seasons passed without sightings. I was about to do that one day and took a last look out, this is so beautiful, last look out of the filming window when I glimpsed something through the heat haze. Initially I thought the sun had reflected off the windscreen of a distant vehicle, but there were no tracks close by. Whatever it was disappeared, then glinted once more. Alert now, it was several minutes before I saw it again. I came to the slow realization that what I was looking at was sunlight reflecting off an elephant's tusks. Gradually, like in the opening scene from the Lawrence of Arabia, their owner materialized through the shimmering haze, a mirage from the Taru Desert, a magnificent, dusty behemoth. Other elephants stood sleeping, clustered in the shade of acacias, apparently unaware of the bull's approach. He didn't walk straight to water. It took him almost an hour to cover the final kilometer as he slowly zigzagged from one bush to another. The glint I'd seen came whenever he turned his head and appeared to bury it in a bush. Each time he did, he'd wait a few minutes, partially hidden, then continue zigzagging upwind, scenting the air to check there wasn't a poacher hidden at the water hole. I was mystified at the bull's poor attempt to hide until it dawned on me that he wasn't trying to hide his body, he was hiding his tusks. At once I was incredibly impressed and incredibly sad, impressed that he should have the understanding that his tusks could put him in danger, but so sad at what that meant. As we neared the waterhole, other elephants left the shade to gather round and greet him. He was a magnificent bull, unmarked apart from a diagonal scar on his trunk. He had the largest tusks I've ever seen. I've shown pictures of him to others, and his tusks are of such a size and sweep that even elephant experts of 40 years standing have had an audible intake of breath. I was thankful that the bull's wounds were healing and that we hadn't had to dart him, but I was devastated that poachers had somehow managed to predict his movements and get close enough to fire 2 poison arrows into him. I'm appalled at what that means, that the survival skills that the bull has painstakingly learnt over half a century have been rendered useless by the poacher's use of mass-produced Chinese goods, GPS smartphones, cheap motorcycles, and night vision goggles. I think the old bull knows that poachers want his tusks, and I hate that he knows. More than anything, I hate the thought that poachers are now closing in on one of the world's most iconic elephants. For over half a century, the vast expanse of the Taru Desert has provided him with refuge, but it no longer seems vast enough. I'll press enter. The Kenya shilling was at 87.91 last. 88.50 is a key level on the charts. The Nairobi All Shares up 10.2085% this year. Not too far off an all-time high. If you want to track the stock exchange in real time, it's free. Just go to the website rich.co.ke, register. You'll get a password. If you have any problems, get hold of us. And you can watch it free in real time during the trading hours, which are 9:30 a.m. till 3 in the afternoon, Kenya time. The NSE 20 is still down for the year, down 1.827%. Kenya is wooing Mauritius with lower taxes. This is a double taxation treaty which is going to encourage more investment from Mauritius, which is a conduit in many cases for Indian investment in particular. Once again, I wish you a safe week. It's good to be back. Thank you.